How will the world actually end? Most people picture an asteroid or a pandemic or a war that spirals out of control over years of rising tension. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The most realistic doomsday scenario isn't slow at all. It might be exactly one mistake away. Not one war, one glitch, one misread signal, one false alarm nobody catches in time. And the terrifying part is, this has already almost happened. September 26th, 1983, a Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov is on duty in a bunker outside Moscow, watching a screen connected to the USSR's brand new early warning satellite system. Suddenly, the system reports something no one wants to see: an incoming American missile. Then, 4 more. Protocol is simple: report it up the chain and the Soviet Union retaliates within minutes. Petrov has less than that to decide. He looks at the data and something feels wrong. 5 missiles is a strange way to start a full nuclear war. He makes the call himself. False alarm. He was right. Sunlight reflecting off high altitude clouds had fooled the satellite into seeing missile plumes that were never there. One man, one judgment call, and the world kept spinning. That story is usually told as a happy ending, but it raises an uglier question. What happens the day the person in that chair isn't paying attention, or panics, or simply isn't there? The Soviet military asked exactly that question, and their answer wasn't to trust people more. It was to remove people from the equation entirely. By the late 1970s, Soviet strategists were terrified of something specific: a decapitation strike. The idea that American precision weapons had gotten accurate enough to wipe out Soviet leadership and command centers in the opening minutes of a war before any retaliation order could even be given. If that happened, deterrence would collapse. There'd be no one left to press the button. So starting in 1974, the Soviets began building a system designed to make that scenario pointless. It was called Perimeter. In the West, it would eventually become known as Dead Hand, because the entire point was that the Soviet Union could strike back even with a dead hand on the trigger. Here's how it's understood to work based on declassified interviews with its own engineers. Perimeter sits dormant most of the time. In a crisis, a senior official switches it on. Once active, it starts monitoring a network of sensors built to detect the unmistakable signature of a nuclear detonation on Soviet, now Russian soil. Seismic shockwaves, flashes of light, radiation spikes, sudden pressure changes. If those sensors trip, the system doesn't launch immediately. It checks something else first. Is there still a working communication line to military command in Moscow? If yes, it assumes leadership survived and stands down. If that link is dead silence for a set window of time, somewhere between 15 minutes and an hour, the system draws the only reasonable conclusion: the people who were supposed to give the order are gone. At that point, launch authority doesn't just vanish. It transfers automatically to whichever duty officers are still alive deep inside a hardened bunker, far from any target worth hitting. If they complete one final check, they can fire something unlike any other weapon in the Soviet arsenal: a specialized command missile carrying not a warhead, but a radio transmitter. That missile flies the length of the country, broadcasting launch codes directly to the silos, submarines, and mobile launchers, still capable of firing even ones that have lost contact with everyone else. This isn't theoretical. In November 1984, the Soviets actually tested it. A command rocket launched from Soviet Belarus successfully transmitted a live launch order to a missile silo near Baikonur in Kazakhstan. That silo opened and an R-36M intercontinental ballistic missile, the missile NATO, nicknamed Satan, fired and struck its target thousands of kilometers away on the Kamchatka Peninsula. The system worked exactly as designed. In 1985, Perimeter formally went online, and it never went away. For decades, Russia neither confirmed nor denied Perimeter existed. That changed in 2011, when General Sergei Karakayev, commander of Russia's strategic missile forces, told a Russian newspaper the system was still active. That same year, retired General Viktor Yeltsin said plainly, "It's on combat duty." Since then, Russian officials have periodically reminded the world it's still there, usually during moments of rising tension with the West, which is itself the entire point. A weapon that guarantees retaliation is only useful if your enemy knows it exists. Here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you though. Even without Perimeter, the world has already come frighteningly close to accidental nuclear war through nothing more than a misread blip on a screen. January 25th, 1995, the Cold War had already ended. Norwegian and American scientists launched a research rocket off the coast of Norway to study the Northern Lights, a routine, publicly announced scientific mission, but its size, its speed, and flight path looked on Russian radar almost identical to an American submarine-launched missile. Notification of the launch had been sent to Russia weeks earlier through diplomatic channels. It just never reached the radar operators who needed to see it. Within minutes, Russian early warning systems escalated all the way to President Boris Yeltsin, who became the first Russian leader in history to have his nuclear briefcase, the Chayget, activated and opened in front of him. For several tense minutes, Russian officials genuinely weighed whether this single, oddly shaped blip was the opening move of a full-scale American attack. It wasn't. The rocket's actual trajectory became clear. The alert stood down, and the story didn't even make Russian news for another week. No malice, no war. Just a research rocket and a communication gap. And for a few minutes, one of the most powerful nuclear arsenals on Earth was genuinely one decision away from launching. That's the real thread connecting all of this. Petrov's 1983 near miss, a 1995 Norwegian rocket, and a machine built specifically to fire back automatically if the people meant to make that decision are no longer alive to make it. Perimeter was engineered in theory to make war less likely. One of its own designers reportedly described its purpose as being to cool down the hotheads and extremists in a crisis. But that same design also means that somewhere in Russia today, there's a system built to make the single most consequential decision in human history without asking a human being first. We spend a lot of time imagining the end of the world as something dramatic, a comet, a plague, a war nobody meant to start. The far stranger truth is that we've already brushed up against it quietly more than once because of a satellite that misread sunlight and a research rocket that looked like the wrong thing on a radar screen. The world hasn't ended yet, but for a few minutes, more than once. It genuinely wasn't far off. If you want more deep dives into the systems, decisions, and near misses most people never learn about, subscribe. This is exactly the kind of thing this channel exists for.